What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the Rantin Review Pro Wrestling. I have been away. I am on wrestling vacation because I got a little bit burned out by watching all the wrestling. But I did check out AEW's All Out this past week. And I gotta say, I've never seen any... Well, I can't say I've never seen anything this crazy before, but this was yet another crazy pay-per-view for All Elite Wrestling. So we're going to touch on the highlights here, some of my criticism, some of my praise. It's going to be more praise than criticism on this show. And yeah, let's get into it right now. We're going to start off, we're just going to randomly go around the card. The match that stands out to me first and foremost, the International Championship match, Pac versus Will Ospreay. We saw this match 5 years ago at High Stakes and Rev Pro. It was a 30-minute time limit. It was right after Pac got out of his contract situation with WWE and got back out there. Ospreay was just catching on the international scene. And here we are 5 years later, and these guys had one of the best matches of the year. Probably is going to be match of the year for a lot of people. That's a stack list this year, given some of the things we've seen from a lot of the different companies. But this one is definitely up there, and you can't do it justice by describing it. It's a recommended match. It's a golden recommended match. You got to watch this thing. Will Ospreay and Pac showing why they are two of the best athletic wrestlers in the entire world. Will Ospreay managing to get the win, managing to retain with a ricochet, watching from the back. That match was followed up by Willow, Nightingale, and Kris Statlander in the Chicago Street Fight. I had a feeling that these women were going to do well. They absolutely killed it. Having to follow Pac and Ospreay is not an easy task, especially if you're in the women's division. That isn't very well looked at. But again, this is the new AEW's women's division, and 90% of the time they're doing well. There's a 10% that they don't, but then there's just 90% here. And Willow and Kris Statlander, man, they tore into each other. There was a senton from the apron to the outside when Willow was on the table. Willow moved, sort of. Kris Statlander crashed through the table, but her legs hit Willow in the back of the head. That looked horrible. I mean, there was blood. There was dog collars. There was thumbtacks. Kris Statlander wound up doing a split on thumbtacks. If any woman wants to know how guys cringe when we see a ball shot, that's probably how you guys cringe seeing what Stat did on that night. But Kris Statlander, amazingly enough, after this war, got the win. And it does look like we're going to move on from these two. This feud's been going on for a while. It's been very well done. This was a great blow off to the feud. I absolutely loved it. Again, another recommended match of the night. You got to see Kris and Willow. And this was the theme of the night. The theme of the night was just violence. And not only violence, attempted murder in many situations. You even had some comedy moments in the night. Okada defended the Continental Championship, which I do think they should get rid of that and just merge it with the International Championship. But Okada had a Continental Championship defense in a fatal four-way against Mark Briscoe, Orange Cassidy, and the returning Kenosuke Takeshita, who may or may not be taking Okada's spot in New Japan at some point in the future. So it was interesting to see those two guys square off, as well as to see Briscoe and Cassidy square off. And they're both members of the conglomeration. So it was, it's a fun little match. Okada retained the championship. I don't think anybody thought he was going to lose. Same thing went for his buddies, the Young Bucks, as they defended the AEW Tag Team titles against Claudio Castagnoli and Wheeler Yuta, the last remnants of the Blackpool Combat Club, which get into that a little bit later on tonight. This match was okay. It was a fun match. It was an average, on this card, it was an average match. 7 years ago, this match would have been, amazing. But, the bar is so high right now that this match was just average. The Bucks did manage to retain the championships. I do wonder, however, obviously, the plan was not ever for them to win the tag titles, Yuta and Castagnoli, and we'll find out later on in the night. Mercedes Moné had the TBS Championship title defense against Hikaru Shida. I expected more out of this match. I think most people did. Mercedes still trying to find her footing in AEW, so we're gonna give it a couple more months. But a lot of people are already calling her a bust and all this other stuff. It's Mercedes Moné. I don't think you can ever call her a bust. I do think she's still just trying to remember she was out of wrestling for a year, so I think she's still trying to find her footing and not wrestling 4 nights a week like she was in WWE, and instead wrestling maybe once every 2 weeks, and then you got to throw in some of her indie stuff or international stuff. You know, it is going to be what it is. This wasn't a great match, probably the least on the card, but Mercedes Moné in a okay match defeated Hikaru Shida. Oh boy, where do we go with the main events? Well, before we get to that, let's do MJF versus Daniel Garcia. Garcia's contract status still up in the air with the AEW faithful, but this was a great opener for the night. Him and MJF set the tone of what was going to be a violent, brutal night with more attempted murders in this match. The pile drivers got sold a lot. Garcia with Daddy Magic on the commentary, they were really putting this over, and all of these storylines in AEW coalescing on this night. And this one with Garcia and MJF. Garcia, even though he loses the match, manages to get some revenge on MJF as he does hit the pile driver from the top rope. The same pile driver that put him out of action for 9 weeks has now possibly put MJF out of action for the foreseeable future. And even though, again, Garcia lost the match, but he won the hearts of the fans, and we'll have to see where this goes in the future, what Daniel Garcia is going to be doing going forward. Much needed, even though it wasn't a win, it was a much needed showing, I should say, from Daniel Garcia. And then the double main event. AEW World Championship, Jack Perry challenging Bryan Danielson. Of course, we are now in the final countdown tour for Bryan Danielson. That kind of worked out really well. This is the final countdown tour. He is the AEW World Champion, and when he loses this belt, that will be his last match as a regular full-time competitor. Of course, we'll see him again in the future on one-offs here and there, but him being full-time, him being on screen every week, not going to happen after he loses his title. So every single match is one of those kind of matches. This is a new trend that has been, again, it's another trend that we borrowed here in the West from over in Japan recently, because over in Japan, this is, kind of, the norm. The guys get a tour where they'll have one last tour and wrestle some matches they always wanted to wrestle, solve some feuds, reignite old feuds, and then they'll have one big retirement match. We saw it with Liger. We saw it with Keiji Muto, the Great Muta. And now the States have started adopting it, which I think is a better way to do it. I kind of wish The Undertaker had one of those. But John Cena is currently on his retirement run, and Bryan Danielson in AEW is on his retirement run right now. Jack Perry is, and this is in Chicago too, it is amazing to me that Jack Perry is this over. And I gotta say something about the Chicago crowd. They're always good. AEW's had a hard time in Chicago since what happened last year happened. But they had I believe it was damn near a sellout on this show, which a show that was not very heavily promoted. It's only got 2 weeks between it and All In, which everything was about All In up until 2 weeks ago. So basically you have a 2-week build to this show, technically, although, a lot of this stuff had been in the works for a while. Jack Perry, the first guy, and I'm sure we're going to see a montage in 6 months when Danielson does have his last match. We're going to see a montage of all the guys that Danielson took out in his title defenses, and this will be the first one. A very, very good showing for Jack Perry in this match. He's mastered control of the heel aspect of him being in the crowd, and especially being in Chicago. They didn't play up on too much of the Chicago Jack Perry stuff, so that was cool. We don't need to go there. Perry's got his own heat now, and he worked it very well in this match. Danielson, even though he was behind the 8 ball a lot in this match, he did manage to make a comeback, showed his toughness, and through a lot of shenanigans in a match that felt like a House of Torture match, to be honest. Remember, Jack Perry technically is in the House of Torture in New Japan, and this felt like a House of Torture match from New Japan, especially near the end with all the run-ins. But after the Bucks and Claudio and Wheeler getting all involved, Bryan Danielson does get the win. Thankfully, he is able to win this match and retain the AEW Championship. After the match, you get Luchasaurus coming in to attack Danielson. Christian Cage comes out with the Patriarchy, but then Claudio, Wheeler, and Pac stand them off, and Jon Moxley, who's with Shafir as well. And all of this stuff that's been going on the last couple weeks on Dynamite is starting to kind of come together a little bit here. So okay, well, Christian still got that contract, but he's not going to do it now. So his technically Money in the Bank AEW version contract, he'll hold on to it for a little bit longer. But then Blackpool Combat Club gets in the ring. They're all celebrating. Everything looks great, but it is Claudio Castagnoli, because we were all waiting for Moxley to do it. Claudio is the one that clobbered Danielson. Danielson has this stunned look on his face as they proceed to beat the crap out of him while holding Wheeler Yuta, who apparently was not part of this. Nigel McGuinness has been giving hints to this for a long time, too, on commentary. Again, the seeds have been planted for this. I don't know where people get this whole AEW doesn't tell storylines thing. I don't get it. I mean, I guess it's just people who don't watch the show. But this has been planted for a while. Yes, they pulled out the spot with the bag. I'm going to bring that up a little bit later on. But Mox does take a plastic bag and tries to suffocate, not choke, suffocate Bryan Danielson. It's a very dangerous thing to do. Please do not try that at home if you are a child. That was a very scary moment at the end of the show, at the end of a very, well, not at near the end of a very extreme show, as Wheeler Yuta is trying to, with paramedics, help Danielson get oxygen and get back to the ring. But Mox's new crew, which apparently is Shafir, Pac, Claudio, they're leaving the Blackpool Combat Club behind, and now something new is coming out of it. So the BCC is no more. Had a good run. I did enjoy the faction, but now let's see what's in the future for Mox and company. And in the main event, as if we didn't have enough violence on the night, it's a steel cage match between Swerve Strickland and Hangman Adam Page. You knew what you were getting in here. You knew you were going to see something crazy. It's AEW. It's the most violent feud they have ever had in their 5-year history, and honestly, one of the most violent feuds in wrestling in recent memory. And, I mean, after seeing everything we already saw on the night, they upped the ante again. There's chairs. There's cinder blocks. There's people getting suplexed and powerbombed on cinder blocks, and you see the marks on their back where the cinder blocks have just scraped off pieces of their skin, especially Hangman Page. Swerve is bleeding. They pulled out everything. The match starts with them trying to fight over who's going to get decapitated as the steel cage is coming down around the ring, trying to hold the other's head underneath it, mainly Swerve, trying to get Page decapitated. These guys literally try to kill each other. Now, it does make sense because Wednesday on Dynamite, Hangman Page actually committed arson and burned down Swerve's childhood home, which Swerve had just bought. And that came into play in this match. They had a spike from the remnants of his home they were trying to stab each other in the head with. Swerve did get the upper hand. But ultimately, it was Hangman Page and a syringe, I kid you not, a syringe to the inside of Swerve's mouth after he took Swerve's grills out. And the referee's like, that's enough. Headshot, that's enough. Where match is over. And that is the end. Hangman Page wins, finally, against Swerve Strickland. And, I mean, last year's match was brutal. This is probably one of the craziest things I've ever seen. Now, I'm going to touch on this in a second. Right, or I should say right now. There were a lot of people I've seen, talking about, is this too far, yada, yada, yada. Everything they did on this night on AEW All Out has been done before in wrestling. Terry Funk, famously, this is the benefit I have of being an old wrestling fan. I remember when Terry Funk put a plastic bag over Ric Flair's head and tried to suffocate him. I remember the dog collar matches. I remember a Magnum TA versus Tully Blanchard in a steel cage where they tried to use a piece of wooden chair that was broken off to stab each other in the head with, same way Hangman and Swerve Strickland did on this night. So none of this is new. This is actually old stuff from 30, 40 years ago that has been brought back in AEW, which is part of what AEW is supposed to do, is bring back some of the things that have been lost over the years with pro wrestling as it's become a lot more tame. But I want to know what you guys thought of this show. I thought the show overall was fantastic. I had a lot of fun with this show. Only a couple matches that I didn't enjoy so much. Mercedes and Shida was okay. The tag team title match was okay. And the 4-way for the Continental Championship was okay. But those are your low spots of the night. And when your low spots of the night are just okay matches that would have been great matches on any other card, and you got a card with Ospreay and Pac, Willow and Statlander, Swerve and Hangman Adam Page, MJF and Garcia. I mean, those 4 matches are amazing. And the main event with Danielson and Jack Perry was nothing to sneeze at either. So this is probably one of the best cards of the year. And I probably will remember it as one of the best cards of the year. But again, I want to know what you guys think. Let your voice be heard in the comment box below. Until next time, I will see you guys here sooner than later. I got a lot of busy stuff on my plate, and I'm going to try to get back to making more videos about wrestling sooner than later. So stay tuned to the channel. If you're not subscribed, hit the subscribe button. I promise there'll be at least 1 or 2 videos up in the next 7 days as we get back into the world of pro wrestling and sports entertainment right here on the Rantin Review Pro Wrestling. Have a good day.